There are truths which cannot be spoken in their time. They are not denied for being false, but for being premature. Just as a child cannot carry the weight of a warrior's armor, the collective mind of an era cannot bear certain revelations until it has matured through suffering, contradiction, and long reflection. This is not censorship born of malice, but of unconscious resistance, an instinctive recoil from the terrifying magnitude of reality. In the depths of human experience there resides a mystery so profound that even language falters before it. What happens when the body ceases to live? What becomes of the essence that animated it, the unseen flame we call the soul? This question, long buried under the rubble of scientific reductionism and religious literalism, is not a matter of dogma or proof. It is a psychological necessity. For it is only when we confront the possibility of something beyond that life here becomes fully meaningful. The psyche, this strange autonomous realm within us, is not a mere epiphenomenon of the brain. It precedes it. It extends beyond it. And if we are brave enough to listen, it reveals symbols and dreams that whisper of its continuity. The near-death experiences, the visions of those on the threshold, the synchronistic events that defy causality, all point not to superstition, but to a dimension in which time and matter are no longer tyrants. One cannot ignore the dreams of the dying. Again and again they speak of journeys, of reunions, of landscapes not of this earth. The soul prepares, it withdraws gradually, sometimes years before the physical cessation. This process is not mere decay, it is transition, a movement inward toward something archetypal, toward what ancient traditions called the other world, what mystics called the beyond, and what the modern psyche glimpses in profound moments of silence, of awe, of terror. What awaits after death is not the projection of our desires, nor the punishment of our guilt. It is something far more intricate, an unfolding of the self beyond its temporal boundaries. In life, the ego serves its purpose, but in death it must relinquish control. The soul is drawn not to pleasure or pain, but to wholeness, to integration. That is why images of judgment, rebirth, and reunion pervade every myth across time and culture, not as dogma but as psychic fact. In the symbolic language of dreams, death is rarely the end, it is a gateway, a crossing, a return. The ancient Egyptians saw the dead weighed against the feather of truth. The Tibetans speak of the bardo, an intermediate state where the soul is offered visions shaped by its own karma. The Greeks envisioned the Elysian fields or the torments of Tartarus depending on the soul's resonance. These are not literal places, but maps of psychic transformation. They describe in mythic terms what the unconscious knows, that the soul continues, though in forms we cannot yet grasp. We must not confuse belief with knowledge. Belief clings to certainty, knowledge rests in experience. And the experience of countless individuals, through dreams, through visions, through numinous encounters, testifies to something that transcends physical death. Not survival in the crude sense, but transformation. The caterpillar does not survive as a caterpillar, it becomes something altogether different. So too with the soul. In my own most vivid visions, what struck me was not fear, but serenity. Not dogma, but light. A profound sense of homecoming. The soul does not face annihilation, but expansion. It is drawn toward the totality of its being, toward the self, the center beyond ego, beyond mortality. There, the fragments of life are gathered, reconciled and understood in a way the waking mind could never achieve. Suffering becomes meaningful, love becomes eternal, and all the forgotten parts of the personality are embraced as necessary facets of the whole. Modern man, lost in rationalism, scoffs at such ideas, but in doing so, he loses his soul. He wanders, disoriented, unable to make sense of his suffering or his longing. He dreams of machines, but forgets the dreamer. He seeks to conquer death, but fears the unknown. And so he dies, not once, but many times in life, spiritually, emotionally, morally. Andy, to restore the balance, we must recover the symbolic life. We must honor the language of the unconscious, the images that arise in stillness and speak of eternity. Only then can we begin to see death not as an end, but as the continuation of a sacred dialogue, a descent into the deep waters where the soul, unshackled, moves freely, gathering the threads of its existence across lifetimes. We cannot know the afterlife as we know the contents of a room, but we can feel it, sense it, intuit its presence. The soul, being eternal, leaves traces of its nature in every act of love, in every confrontation with the void, in every glimpse of the numinous. Life prepares us for death not through avoidance, but through participation in the great mystery. Every ending is a symbol, every goodbye is an echo of the great farewell that is also a return. And perhaps the question is not what comes next, but who is it that journeys onward? For the ego, which clings and fears, may dissolve, but the self, which waits and watches, continues its unfolding. And so, death is not a failure of life, but its crowning moment, a passage into greater reality, a reunion with that which we have always carried within us, the divine spark, the eternal flame, the soul's true home. The soul, in its deepest essence, is not confined to the physical body. To understand this, one must abandon the purely materialistic view of existence and descend into the symbolic realm where psyche and matter interweave. The body is the vessel, the temporary form through which the soul experiences individuation, growth, and suffering. But the soul, timeless, autonomous, and profound, belongs to another order of reality. It is neither born with the body nor extinguished with it. Rather, it moves through life as a sojourner, gathering impressions, lessons, and fragments of the self. In the moment of death, what ceases is the ego's reign. The structures of identity, tied to the body and the external world, begin to fall away. The soul is not destroyed, it is released. And in that release, it undergoes a transformation that cannot be grasped by ordinary perception, but is mirrored in myth, dream, and archetype. This transformation is not arbitrary or chaotic. It follows a deep inner pattern, a movement that reflects the soul's journey toward wholeness. In life, we experience this movement through the unconscious, through symbols that erupt in dreams, through moments of synchronicity, through the inner pull toward meaning. Death is not a break in this process, but a culmination of it. The dissolution of the body permits the psyche to unfold without the constraints of time, space, and sensory perception. This unfolding is not a vanishing, but an intensification. It is as if the soul, long suppressed under the noise of the physical world, finally finds the silence in which to speak its full truth. The symbolic traditions of every culture have spoken of this transformation. They have done so not with empirical data, but with images, metaphors, and sacred stories. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, the Christian vision of resurrection, the Platonic idea of the soul's return to the realm of forms, all these point to a universal psychological reality, that the soul continues in some form, and that this continuation is governed not by moral judgment alone, but by psychic resonance and archetypal necessity. The transformation after death is a reordering of the soul's contents. What was fragmented becomes whole, what was hidden becomes visible, and what was unconscious is brought into a new form of awareness. In the final phases of life, many individuals begin to encounter this transformation before death itself. Dreams shift. Images of travel, of crossing rivers or entering unfamiliar rooms become more common. People speak of deceased loved ones waiting for them, of voices calling, of doors opening. These are not hallucinations in the pathological sense, but symbolic expressions of the soul's preparation. The psyche, knowing that the time of departure is near, begins to withdraw from the sensory world and reorient itself toward the inner one. The rational mind may resist this, but the unconscious proceeds quietly, moving toward a different reality that transcends our categories of time and space. In this post-mortem state, the soul is not a ghost or a shade in the folkloric sense. It is a psychological reality freed from the restrictions of ego and matter. Its transformation involves a confrontation with all that was unlived, unspoken, unresolved. This confrontation is not punishment, but integration. The soul encounters not external judges, but its own inner truths. In this way, the transformation is therapeutic. It is the final and ultimate analysis, in which the soul, stripped of its earthly distractions, must face itself fully. The images that arise, of light, of tunnels, of gardens, of vast spaces, are symbolic expressions of this inward journey. They are archetypes of transition, familiar to us because they lie deep in the collective unconscious. The continuation of the soul is not a static existence in some heavenly abode, but an active process. Transformation implies movement, not stasis. Just as in life we are drawn toward individuation, toward the realization of the self, so in death the soul continues this movement, albeit in another dimension. It may pass through different symbolic stages, just as myths speak of purgatories, heavens, underworlds, and celestial realms, not as places but as psychic conditions. Each soul, carrying the unique imprint of its life, traverses a path shaped by its inner structure. This is why no two near-death experiences are the same. Each is tailored to the symbolic reality of the individual. The forms differ, but the essence is the same, a movement toward wholeness. When the soul is freed from the body, it also becomes unbound by the limitations of linear time. Past, present, and future lose their rigidity. Memories may unfold as visions, long-buried emotions may rise into clarity, and aspects of the personality long forgotten may come into alignment. The soul is not judged from without, but drawn inward by the magnetic pull of its own completeness. This is not wishful thinking or sentimental comfort. It is a psychic process that arises from the deepest strata of the unconscious. The transformation of the soul after death is akin to the unfolding of a dream, in which symbols, patterns, and meanings that once lay hidden become visible in new and unexpected ways. Many resist this idea because it challenges the supremacy of the rational mind. The ego wishes to believe it is the master of reality, and so it fears the dissolution that death brings. But in truth, the ego is only a temporary arrangement, a necessary fiction that allows us to function in the physical world. The soul, on the other hand, is a far more enduring reality. It weaves through many lifetimes, many identities, many deaths and rebirths. Its transformation is not about holding on to the self we knew, but about becoming the greater self we were always meant to become. In this sense, death is not the enemy, but the threshold. We do not need to rely on external authorities to sense this truth. It is already within us. Every moment of profound insight, every dream that shakes us to the core, every numinous experience that breaks through our routines, these are glimpses of the soul's greater journey. They are the soul's way of reminding us that life is not confined to what we see. The transformation that occurs after death is part of a larger process of becoming that spans dimensions beyond our comprehension. The soul moves toward light not as a metaphor, but as a reality we can feel, if not yet fully understand. This light is not physical, but psychological, an illumination of the totality of being. It is the final stage of the alchemical process, the conjunction of opposites, the reconciliation of all that was divided. To speak of life after death in psychological terms is not to reduce it, but to deepen it. For psychology, rightly understood, is the study of the soul, and the soul, by its very nature, does not end with the cessation of bodily functions. It undergoes a metamorphosis, a shift into another state of being. This transformation is not an escape from life, but its completion. It is not a denial of suffering, but the understanding of it. It is the fulfillment of the symbolic journey that each person embarks upon from birth, the journey toward the self, toward wholeness, toward the divine dimension of reality that lies hidden within and beyond all things. Dreams, visions, and archetypal symbols are not random byproducts of the mind, nor are they mere entertainment of the sleeping brain. They are the language of the soul, speaking in images rather than concepts, revealing truths that rational discourse is too limited to hold. When the conscious mind is quiet, whether through sleep, altered states, or moments of profound stillness, the unconscious steps forward, offering symbols that reach beyond personal experience and touch the timeless. Within these symbols lie insights not only about the individual's inner life, but about existence itself, including that which lies beyond the veil of death. The unconscious is not bound by the limitations of the ego or the physical senses. It reaches both backward into ancient collective memory and forward into possibilities that the conscious mind cannot yet perceive. Symbols that appear in the dreams of the dying, for example, often reflect motifs seen across cultures and centuries. People see bridges, tunnels, ships, rivers, thresholds, images associated with crossing, with departure, with transformation. These are not inventions of fantasy, but spontaneous productions of the psyche that reflect the universal experience of approaching the unknown. When someone dreams of stepping into a boat and sailing toward a mist-covered horizon, the image is not a hallucination. It is a message from the deeper layers of the mind, preparing the soul for its transition. Archetypal symbols are the inherited forms of the psyche. They arise without our conscious choosing, and yet they contain patterns that resonate with us across languages, cultures, and histories. The symbol of the journey, for instance, appears in countless myths and spiritual traditions because it mirrors an inner psychic truth. Life is a passage, not a fixed state. When this journey reaches its final stage, death, symbols appear that provide orientation, meaning, and sometimes even comfort. They are the psyche's way of bridging the gap between the known and the unknown, between the personal and the transpersonal. In each, visions often arise at critical moments, during illness, near-death experiences, or profound psychological crises. In such states, the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious become porous. People report seeing radiant figures, vast landscapes, ancestral presences, or great lights. These visions, though often dismissed by materialist thinking, are consistent in content and structure across cultures. They bear the hallmarks of archetypal symbolism. They are charged with emotion, carry a sense of profound reality, and seem to operate outside the normal flow of time. These are not arbitrary hallucinations, but expressions of a deeper layer of being that exists beyond the ego's grasp. The symbolic nature of these visions serves a psychological function. They provide continuity between life and death. They make the transition meaningful, not through literal promises, but through inner images that resonate with the soul's experience. The psyche knows that death is not an end but a transformation, and it expresses this knowing through dreams and symbols. The presence of a deceased loved one at the bedside of the dying person, for instance, is not simply a comforting image, it reflects the archetype of the guide, the psychopomp, the one who leads the soul across the boundary. Whether it takes the form of a relative, an angel, or a mythic figure, the meaning is the same. The unconscious provides a structure for the soul's passage. Wrapped in the garments of personal association and cultural tradition, what is remarkable is how these dreams and visions occur even in those who do not consciously believe in an afterlife. The rational mind may deny, but the unconscious persists in its expressions. A person may claim that death is the final end, yet dream of walking through a gate into a radiant garden. Such dreams challenge the ego's assumptions, not through argument, but through symbolic confrontation. The soul, through its symbolic language, insists on its own continuity. It does not speak in logical terms, but in images that transcend logic. The dream is not trying to convince, but to reveal. Symbols have a strange power. They cannot be fully interpreted because they are multivalent. They contain layers of meaning, some of which escape articulation. A single dream image may contain personal significance, collective resonance, and spiritual implication all at once. This is why dream analysis is not a science in the narrow sense, but an art of deep listening. The dream does not offer answers in the form of conclusions, but in the form of invitations. It invites the dreamer to descend, to reflect, to feel, and to integrate. In doing so, it prepares the soul for its ultimate task, to pass from this world into the unknown with consciousness. When we consider the consistency of archetypal symbols across cultures, we begin to glimpse the underlying unity of the human psyche. The river Styx, the Bardo states, the hall of judgment, the bridge over the abyss, the wheel of rebirth. These are not simply different cultural stories, but reflections of the same psychic experience rendered in different mythic language. They reveal that the unconscious holds an image of life after death, not as a definitive map, but as a symbolic guide. These symbols give death shape and meaning. They suggest that the psyche does not encounter a void, but a realm shaped by its own inner truths. In the symbolic world, opposites unite. Death is married to birth, darkness to light, loss to gain. The vision of life after death that arises in dreams and archetypes is not linear or static. It is dynamic, transformative, and deeply paradoxical. The soul may encounter shadows, images of guilt, fear, or unresolved conflict, but these are not punishments. They are aspects of the self that must be faced and integrated. The afterlife, then, is not a reward or a sentence, but a process of deeper realization. It is the continuation of the individuation journey, which does not end with physical dissolution, but carries forward into other dimensions of being. Symbols that arise around death often carry a numinous quality. They feel more real than waking life. People who have experienced near-death states often describe their visions as profoundly convincing, filled with clarity, peace, and a sense of timeless truth. Whether or not these experiences reflect literal realities is not the essential question. What matters is the psychological fact that the soul produces these images. It does so spontaneously, without suggestion, as if it were reaching toward a reality that lies just beyond the threshold of waking awareness. These symbols point to the continuity of consciousness, to a form of life that transcends biological function. The symbolic vision of death is therefore a mirror of the soul's nature. Just as the seed contains the image of the tree, the soul contains the image of what it may become beyond the limits of physical existence. This image is not a fantasy. It is a psychic reality that shapes our fears, our hopes, and our experiences at the boundary of life and death. The more we attend to these symbols, the more we begin to sense that death is not alien to life, but woven into its very fabric. It is a return, a transformation, a reabsorption into the greater self. The soul does not express itself through argument or proof, but through images. These images arise spontaneously, pointing toward truths that the intellect cannot reach. They carry the weight of the timeless, the presence of the sacred, the touch of the eternal. They are glimpses of what lies beyond, not in the sense of empirical knowledge, but in the sense of deep psychological resonance. Through them, the soul whispers what it already knows, that life continues in ways we are only beginning to comprehend, and that death is but a veil through which the psyche passes into another form of reality. That in the symbolic structure of the psyche is not perceived as a termination, but as a return to a state of completeness that transcends the fractured condition of everyday consciousness. In the framework of inner development, the individual spends life gathering fragments of experience, identity, and shadow. This collection of parts, often disjointed and in conflict, seeks a center, a unifying principle that restores order and coherence. The process of death, viewed through the lens of the soul, is the final act in this drama of becoming whole. It is not the obliteration of existence, but the synthesis of all that has been lived, all that has been repressed, and all that was never fully realized. This return to wholeness is not a passive state, nor is it simply a reward for moral conduct. It is an archetypal pattern embedded deep in the psyche, guiding the soul toward the completion of its journey. In life, this movement is partially glimpsed through the process of individuation, the unfolding of the self, which integrates conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine. Death, then, is the ultimate threshold where this integration continues on a deeper, non-material level. The opposites that once struggled for dominance in the ego consciousness now converge into a higher unity. The soul moves from duality to totality, from fragmentation to harmony. In dreams and visions associated with dying, individuals often report being reunited with long-lost loved ones or entering places that evoke a deep sense of belonging, familiarity, and peace. These are not just psychological comforts, they are manifestations of the soul's movement toward a state of reintegration. The figures encountered in these visions may represent parts of the self that were split off or lost during the course of life. Reuniting with them is symbolic of the soul reclaiming its own lost aspects. This is the restoration of inner balance, the reclaiming of what was denied, the acceptance of what was feared or forgotten. The self, as the inner center and totality of the psyche, draws the soul inward at death, much like a gravitational pull. This process is not imposed from without. It arises organically from within. Just as a plant turns instinctively toward the light, the soul moves instinctively toward the self. And the self, in its essence, is timeless, encompassing not only the individual life just lived, but a greater continuity that defies linear understanding. Death becomes a transition into the realm of the self, where time dissolves, boundaries fall away, and the psyche becomes immersed in a more expansive reality. Throughout life, the ego often resists the pull of the self. It fears dissolution, loss of control, and the surrender of its cherished identity. But in death, the ego is no longer the central authority. Its structures break down, and in that breaking something more fundamental emerges. The true essence of the individual, the soul that was always present, though obscured, steps forward into clarity. This clarity is not the result of reasoning, but of direct experience, an encounter with the depths of the psyche that had always been there waiting to be seen. Many traditions depict this return to wholeness through powerful imagery. The circle, the mandala, the eternal flame, the light at the end of the tunnel. These are not decorative symbols. They are expressions of psychic realities encountered when the soul crosses the threshold of death. In those moments, the individual is no longer identified solely with personal history or outer achievement. The essence of the being is known in its totality, not as a sequence of events, but as a unified presence. It is this presence that death unveils, and in that unveiling, the soul comes home to itself.